Welcome to another episode of Rooted and Restored. I'm super thrilled to be with you today, and I have a different co host with me or guest. We are super excited to be bringing parts of my family. You already have met my stepdaughter, and today you get to meet my husband as we talk about the month of June. And one of the holidays that's celebrated during this month is Father's Day. And Father's Day has a lot of different meanings to everyone. And I thought there was nobody better than inviting my husband, Rob, to the table to share a little bit about his journey. So, welcome, Rob.
Thank you.
I think this is your first podcast, right?
Yes,
How are you feeling?
I'm good.
So, would you just let everybody know a little bit about who you are and maybe just invite us into the parenting journey that you've been on?
Okay, well, I'm a father of five. I teach at Northport High School. I'm now the baseball coach at Northport High as well. Just took that position last week. Also, I'm a business owner of a landscape business as well. And then, like I said, five children. One that is grown, and then I have three teenagers, and then a son that is 9 years old.
Yeah, and can you tell me a little bit about each of the relationships you have with each of those kids?
Yeah, they're all different. So, my daughter, my oldest one, basically, I had her when I was 24 years old,
Mm-hmm.
almost 25, and we had a little bit of the beginning of my daughter's life was difficult in the fact that I was previously married and then divorced, and my daughter moved away to Tampa, even though we had a joint custody situation. And then ultimately, in the long run of things, when she got into middle school, she came to live with us full time, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there on out, she was in our household, and then went on to Northport High School, and then graduated at FAU, and then finished her master's with UCF. My son, Bo, um, our relationship is a little bit different than all the girls' relationships. I've always coached my son Bo since he was 4 years old, all the way up to now, and then fortunately I'm able to coach him in high school, which I think was always the goal.
Mm-hmm.
So now that came through, and we're having the opportunity to do that. So we've always had a tight bond through athletics, but also a special bond in the fact that it was my first son, and we have a lot of similarities in the two of us. So it's a special relationship, different than any other one that I have in the household. Um, and then my daughter Riley, my stepdaughter Riley, came into my life when she was the same age as Bo. They were very young, 2 years oldish. And like we said, we have a blended family. So this was my stepdaughter, really close in age to Bo.
Mm-hmm.
A very different relationship in all of them, in the fact that, we have grown through the years to be a lot closer. And of course, now that she's at Northport High School, we get to share the experience of high school. We get to talk about the teenage stuff, the difficult, the good, all of that stuff. And she also is involved in athletics, so we get an opportunity to talk about that. I have her in one of my classes and weight training. So it's special that I get to have Bo and Riley right now at the school that I teach at, that I've been at for so long. And now they get to experience that with me. Of course, my daughter Callie went through as well. And but it's different this time with these two. The first time was its own thing, and now this time coming through is a little bit different with the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's unique. And then we have Sydney, and Sydney once was really, really little when we got together,
Mm-hmm.
and different relationship. Also a very strong relationship, has athletic background as well. I mean, that's pretty much the theme throughout our household. But that Sydney is our funny one in our household. Just always has something to put a smile on your face. Totally different personality, but we've been through some stuff and some struggles with different things in the dynamic of our relationship, and she's had to go through it as well. And it's been special to see her grow and see where she's at right now. And then my littlest one, Brooks, is probably the fire plug of all of them. He's kind of what I would say is you and I wrapped up together, right? super intelligent kid. Has had the benefits of watching all his siblings grow up and trying to be the one that is always in charge. So he's just got the dynamic personality because he's always had to fight to get in any of the attention, but somehow he always figures out how to get that.
Hmm.
Also, a little athlete. A lot of similarities at his age to where I was at when I was his age right now.
Hmm.
So it's kind of neat to see.
Yeah, so you have experience with young adulthood, adolescence, and this like elementary school age. But there's a part of you that you didn't mention, and it's this coach role that you've had for a lot of your career. And I feel like that would be amiss if we didn't talk about how you've been a father to many in that way.
Yeah. Um, yeah, that's really the special part about teaching and coaching is the behind the scenes stuff that nobody gets to see, the grind, if you would, every day of the stuff that these kids go through. There's never a day since I was at that school that there's ever been a situation where you didn't need to get involved with a student to make it a better day here or there. The relationship building is a constant. It's a constant, and therefore when you do that, your atmosphere becomes better. The relationships with everybody becomes better. In the past with teams, that's exactly what you need to be able to move forward and be successful. Wins take care of themselves, but building the relationships with the kids, I was fortunate enough to have a lot of my former players come back, and I don't even know how many messages I got over the last 4 or 5 days, but it's been unbelievable. I think how many of them have come back to talk about different stuff, and obviously I shared with you last night one of my players that was injured in war and gave his time in the service and actually reached out last night and went through a whole lot, some major injuries with his head and all that stuff, and he worked everything out, and now he's a father and very successful at what he does. And he reached out yesterday and said he would love to talk to the kids anytime that was available. So it's special. That's a thing that I really enjoy. It was given to me as a kid. My coaches were always really instrumental in my life, and I try to give that back all the time. It's different in school than it is in your household,
Hmm.
but in school you do have a fatherly way about yourself with your kids. That's of course, in my eyes, it's an expectation to be another tool for them at the school. Maybe someone that they can say a little bit more to than what they may at home.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think about how important it is for people to understand that that's why I've invited you today, right? You've been parenting for half of your life, coaching for half of your life, that the conversation we're going to have today is really based on personal experience. It's not based on reading a book or anything else other than your own journey through this. And, as we always say on this podcast, we're real people doing real life. And so, right, today maybe you'll share some insights with us as to like the real human that's behind this, that even though maybe people watching today say like he's got it all together, but the reality is, right, there's been some struggles in our family, and there's been some struggles in your own journey with your father that have contributed to the beauty of who you are today.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so would you be open to maybe just opening up what was your journey like with your own father as we think about how you learned first to become a dad?
Mm. So my father was always kind of my hero, growing up, and it's hard for me to talk about this. Um, it's hard for me to talk about it just because as my dad passed away not that long ago, but 2017, and it was a very unexpected passing, and there was, our relationship was always of respect, but at the same time, um, sometimes I didn't get to get as close to him as I wanted to growing up. So, I leaned on coaches and I leaned on other people because I was in a divorce situation. I only saw my father every other weekend. My dad came to all my sporting events. He rarely missed anything. I played soccer, football, baseball, golf. I played swimming. I did everything. Um, and it was always, he was always there at anything I did. We always shared, talks after games or whatnot, even when I wasn't in his household, which was quite often. So there was a special relationship. But as we were getting older, it was getting closer because some of the walls came down, and we were so much alike that, his work ethic he passed on to me, and we were so much alike, and we were so like just the same person in some places. So sometimes that didn't really click as adults as far as where my place was with him. So I had to go out and do my own journey, and my journey was coaching. That's what I wanted to do, and I don't know if it was the most popular thing in my family because my dad was a business owner and probably wanted to see me follow his footsteps, but I had to go out and do what I did. And through that journey, it wasn't the easiest thing in the world because I had to go through a lot of different doors to figure out where I was at. And I started in Tampa, and then I went into a big parking business and did that for like 4 years. High stress, high volume deal where there was a lot of pressure on myself at a very young age in my really early 20s, and I was running like 200 people. But that ended up setting me up for coming into coaching when I came down in '01 to Northport High School. I had led so many adults that, leading, young teenagers, was not the hardest thing for me to do. Um, I don't get uncomfortable around kids. I embrace the more the better. Um, does not, affect me at all. It's my thing. Everybody has their thing. That's my thing. I like to motivate. And so I even went on to that. I got into the coaching and back into my dad's role when I started here at Northport the first time through. He was very supportive, came to games, did all that type of stuff. And he watched me, battle as a young person. And what I mean by that is I've always had multiple jobs. So I've never just been a teacher. I mean, I was a teacher and I never had a chance to, get back into doing my master's. So I turned around and got my master's degree and got a plus 45 doing that with all these kids and all these different jobs that I was doing, and at the same time running a baseball team, and then also trying to make sure that my kids were, the players were getting the best opportunity if they were college level, and running them all over the place to try to do that. So it was really a struggle early on with a lot of different things. Balance of the family was difficult while I was going through that. And during that time, my dad and I didn't have a lot of time when I was in my late 20s and early 30s where we got to spend a lot of time together. And then into my 40s, I started to have that opportunity. And that unfortunately was the end of my dad's life here.
Yeah. So your dad lives on through you. What would you say the legacy that you have maybe adopted from him or that lives inside of you is what you're carrying forward?
So work ethic, you know, yeah. Hmm. I say that because my dad gave me that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
He taught me how to grind and like it. And, my dad's dad did the same thing. He passed it down to my dad. My grandfather was a very successful construction business owner. He passed it down to my dad. My dad ended up opening up his own business, became very successful with that. They were workers, just straight out, get it done, work, go hard, make relationships. And my father had a really good reputation in Sarasota. He was just a good man, and he did it right. So he showed me. I watched. I paid attention. I think sometimes maybe as parents we don't know how much our kids are actually paying attention to the way that we go about our business. But my father was the guy that was up at 4:30 every day, no matter what. Didn't matter what was going on. That was what it was. And then he would go until he was done with whatever he did. and I watched that. And my father did some things with me with work. When I was younger, I was expected to go out and learn how to work on a job site of 100 guys, and there was no, give me any kind of special treatment. We were pumping concrete, and it was like, figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And that was at like 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. And then coming back from college, a couple of times I ended up working for my grandfather's old business as well. But constantly always learning how to have a good work ethic. And I knew later on in life why that was, because it set me up for, whatever was coming at me, it wasn't too much. It
Mm-hmm.
was always, I can do more, I can do just a little bit more than the next person, and I think it kind of goes with the slogan that I always had at the school, the Augie thing that we created, and which was just encompassing of that. You give everything you have every day, and then at the end of the day, sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not. But did you bring what you have to the table every day? Um, as a good coach teacher, I think that you're responsible for doing that.
Mm.
Your kids come in, they may have a bad day at home, they might have a tragedy in their life or whatever, and they expect you to be there and to bring it. And I think that's a huge responsibility, and you have to own it.
Mm-hmm.
And with that being said, sometimes as teachers, as people, as normal citizens of this area, we go into school and we've got our own deal. And then there was a long period of time where when I was doing teaching, coaching at the first half of it, my personal life was all over the place. And that was a hard balance at the time.
Mm. And maybe that's a good bridge for us to go into. When you think about what you just shared, and I appreciate how vulnerable you're being, because I feel like the people watching, right, maybe they don't have a model of what a dad or a father figure looks like. Maybe they haven't been fortunate. We know the statistics are there's more people living without a father in a home than there are living with a two-parent home together, and so hearing you and hearing the importance, even though your dad wasn't with you all the time, the legacy he still was able to leave. So I just feel like as we're navigating this conversation, there might be people listening that's like, yeah, but I have this, and yeah, but I have that. But just realizing that your story encompasses all of that. And so as you mentioned, the need for just kind of this idea that, like, hey, we're not always perfect as parents, we have our own personal struggles, we're humans too. Like, can you bring that conversation to life in whatever you're comfortable sharing about where did your humanity maybe interrupt the fathering experience you wanted to deliver your children, or where have you made maybe mistakes along the way, just allowing us into your humanity?
Um, I will just say that, some relationships and different things that I went through, I didn't have the best balance. Wasn't necessarily grounded enough to make some of the decisions that would have made it easier for me.
Mm.
I think that what was constant is my children have always been first. They've always been the priority. Whether or not my own situation was a roller coaster or not, the expectation was to show up to work, do what you got to do, figure that out, and then, after that, you might be dealing with a whole lot of stuff after that, which I was for a long time.
Mm. Okay. And when you think about that, like, what would you say to somebody who might be dealing with all the extra stuff, right? Even though they're trying to prioritize their children, that they have all this extra stuff. They're trying to make their bills, they're trying to manage a relationship, maybe they're struggling in their own journey with a substance issue or trauma. I mean, there's so many things that we're negotiating as people these days. What would you say to somebody who might be in the midst of that right now?
Mm. Well, I mean, if we're talking about if I were to look at myself when I was um, 35 to where I'm at right now, I will tell you that, number one, you got to keep moving forward. Um, you going through problems or struggles, whatever they may be, you got to find resources to help yourself with wherever you're at. So it might be your faith, it might be, therapy, it might be friends, but you have to be connected to people to actually be able to check your ego in place of all the different things that may be holding you back. So I think maybe that got in my way when I was younger. Um, and then when I got older and had been knocked down enough times and had to bring myself back up, then every time I got knocked down, I came back with something a little bit more. Leaned on some faith, went to therapy, did some different things. I mean, I started a lot of intensive therapy when my father died, because it was a huge struggle for me. It lasted for well over a year and a half, almost 2 years of just, I couldn't handle it. And that's why I got emotional earlier. I didn't get a chance to say goodbye to my dad. And I'm not the only person. A lot of people, that's a situation, but that's not easy. And especially when I would come from a family where I wasn't in my dad's house so all the time. So I earned for that relationship as we got older, and it was developing in our older years. So when that got stripped, it was hard. So pulling to your resources. I mean, we could sit here and say, I mean, this. I go to a meeting group every week. I go to therapy, once a month. I was in therapy for years, a couple times a month, and as well as different meetings and groups that are supportive. I've had to lean on my faith a lot. My faith has brought me back to where I'm at right now. So moving forward, constantly knowing that there's resources and that you can do things that maybe you don't think you could do. Like, I don't think there's some things that I do now with my personal journey that would not even have been a thought process to myself, even 5 years ago.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. And I appreciate you kind of holding the space for somebody who might be watching that goes, I don't need that. Or that's for, losers, or, they've never been invited into a space where they've seen somebody relatable like you say, like, hey, dude, this is necessary. If you're going to be the man that you want to be, if you want to be the father that you want to be, if you want to leave the legacy like you're speaking to, it's absolutely necessary to take care of yourself.
Mm.
Yeah, it's really powerful. And you had said that part of the AUGE, AUGE, is to do with your dad, and it stands for all you got every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about who you are in our family, Rob, and how I always tell you that you walk into a room and you can change an atmosphere. You can make it positive or you can make it negative. We always know if you've had a really great day or if you've really twisted your space to make yourself, come home more positively, or if you're coming home with more of a negative mindset. Everybody knows, right? So as we integrate the all you got every day with this idea that men have that capacity to hold the container for their family, for their children, for whomever it is that they're journeying through life with. What do you want to say about that?
Okay, so as you're talking, what comes to me is the same thing that was brought up to me. I mean, when my dad walked in a room, you were in attention to what was going on. Like, he commanded a presence all the time, and not out of like demanding it. He did it out of his work ethic, the way he drove, the way he cared about his kids, the way he showed up, all of that. So that set up myself watching that, and then trying to later on in my life model that. There was a lot of years where my own personal relationships were so up and down that I probably didn't have that going on. Now it's a different thing. Yet it is absolutely. Do I see our kids change if the role in I come in and there's a different mindset? Yes, absolutely. More so than when you come in the house, right? So if there's something off with me, it affects everything in the house. So you have to learn how to come in and bring it just like you bring it on the outside, which isn't always the easiest thing to do. We talked about how that works for a lot of time, a lot of years of, because I would go so hard all day long, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then coming in the door and going, I just want to have my own time, versus that's not really what works. So you got to go and hit another gear.
Mm-hmm.
And in our household, that's a gear all the time. It doesn't turn off. I mean, I know that other people in this town and around here are the same situation, but we have to really be on point all the time in our household to keep it moving in the way that it is.
Yeah. And speaking as your wife, and for the ladies watching, like that's so important to me to be able to feel safe in that space so that I can show up as my encouraging, nurturing self. Because when you don't show up that way, I feel like I need to show up that way. And then I'm screaming and out of control, and it's just causing chaos in our family, right? You call me that like power chick sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I notice that that comes out mostly when you're not able to bring that better self of yours. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's enter into the step parenting conversation, right? We have the variety. We have the his, mine, his, yours, mine, ours, whatever that saying is. And we talked on my podcast about being a mom to, the variety of children and relationships we have, about how unique those dynamics are. I'd like to just start with the step parenting conversation because your version of this is much different than mine, being that, right, I have an ex-husband and that journey hasn't always been easy, and we contend with the girls going to his home every other weekend, and just the dynamics that started our journey with our relationship. How did that impact you, and how have you evolved as the girls have gotten older and you've gotten more or better at navigating step parenting?
So, going back to the navigating of the step parent. Okay, so it looks way different now than it did before. So our kids all grew up together, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they were babies to one just walking, and then we went from there. The first part of our relationship as step parents was really, really hard. Um, yeah, they were little, so everybody loved everybody, but it was really difficult because we were navigating our relationship together, what that looked like with exes, all that. A lot of pressure, a lot of different dysfunction, um, but pushing through that. And as it evolved, um, getting really close to the kids and this as a step parent to the girls, and then you with Callie and Bo, and then coming to a point where when they got a little bit older, where they're at now, then we hit a whole nother phase, which was trying to find out where we were as step parents with each particular one. So my role with the girls is different than it is with my biological kids. It's a different role. Not that we don't love them just as much, but it's a different thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm there for other reasons. I'm there to be a dad in that household and make sure that they're protected and do all of those things that any dad would do, but I'm not dad. And, I don't try to replace that either.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just doing the best I can where I'm at
Mm-hmm.
with that.
Yeah, and that's been a really fluid journey for us, to your point, right? Like learning what does it really look like, and really naming that out loud. And there's been times where you and I've actually had conversations, actually more times than I can count, where we've decided that, like, hey, you know your children better than this, or you have a space that you can carry for the children that I've birthed and brought into this world. Like, but we actually have conversations that say, like, I don't know how to talk to Bo about this, or like, I need you to step in this way, but it's going to be different for me to let that like go and let you step in and parent Riley that way. Maybe just bring light to what that has felt like from your point of view.
Um, well, I think it's just evolving. I mean, as we have identified that in our journey of with our kids, then we've spoken that as we brought it into truth. We fought it for a long time, right? And then we figured that there is a best way, best practice for when there's something that comes up, who's going to handle it and how it's going to be handled. So it's just like in the coaching scenario, right? You have different coaches that have relationships that are different with different players.
It's a great metaphor.
So those particular coaches sometimes need to speak to a individual on the team more so than one coach, and maybe even more so sometimes than the head coach, because they've got this bond and they know a little bit more about what's going on with them. So you let that happen because it brings the organization to a better place. It brings your team into a better place. Um, so that goes into the household. Whereas sometimes I need to talk to Bo one on one about something that's coming from a dad's angle. Like, I got to ride him about something and push him and do the, play the dad, but also play, the guy who's trying to motivate, and that looks different than what you would do with him. Um, and I know that part about him. But then there's at the same time, then there's with Bo, there's things that he needs on the um, motherly side that I can't provide. So when he's in our household, a lot of the time, you have to do that. No different than the girls, right? So
Right.
the girls will take advantage of you sometimes because you're mom, and then I have to step in and be dad and
Mm-hmm.
say, we're not doing that here. And that works because they understand that, we're consistent with the way that we roll in the house.
Mm-hmm.
So we have ups and downs all the time, right? But to say that you're going to come into our house and see total chaos, that's not happening.
Mm-hmm. It's powerful. Yeah. And I love how you said it's always evolving and that we're getting better at it every day. But I mean, we are 12 years into this relationship. And so, right, if this conversation would have been a lot different at year one, at year five, right, there's been a lot of things that we fought for. And I think it's important. We've been really honest on this podcast, but in general, right, our lives are very open and we've been very authentic. We've decided to live that way. And I feel like you and I are breaking a lot of the generational patterns that were maybe downloaded into our journey. And one of them is fighting for our relationship. And I feel like it's really important that we say that because parenting is parenting, but without the foundation of a healthy family structure, whether it's a single mom doing this, being, her healthiest self, or a single dad doing it. But fortunately, you and I have been able to model something different than you and I saw growing up. Like, what has that meant to you on your parenting journey of having a solid relationship, fighting for a relationship after having years of not doing that? And maybe just elaborate for us on what that might mean to you.
Okay. So behind the scenes, right? Like you always you see, like we said, you would never see that in our household. But at the same time, let's say this: you would never know what goes on behind closed doors. I mean, we've had really tough conversations in our relationship. There's been times where we are on the break of the end of it, right? Because there's just so much on our plate all the time, and I think that it would be safe to say if we weren't evolving into other people, we might not have made it
Hmm.
because there was so much on our plate as far as the different dynamics in our household, the different step parents in our household, the pressure that all brings because it's every day, constantly, all the time, and you have to continuously grow or you end up getting overwhelmed by it. And there was times in our relationship where I was overwhelmed and I couldn't handle some of the things that were going on. Um, but we didn't quit, and we kept pushing through. And what that looks like for you looked different for me.
Mm-hmm.
And being married to a therapist, sometimes there was direction that was laid out for me that maybe somebody else would not have had, which I'm thankful for. Um, I don't know if that's where we're at, but that's the answer to what we're talking about. But yeah, totally different than it was at the beginning.
Yeah. And so this just brings us to a beautiful end as I just think about thanking you for being here and like the vulnerability that you shared, but also asking you to leave our listeners with maybe just an overall statement of what maybe somebody said to you or what you would want them to hear today. Maybe they're struggling with finding out that they just became a father and they didn't expect to be a father. Or maybe they aren't seeing their children but during summer times. Or maybe they're struggling in relationship with their 15-year-old or have an estranged 30-year-old or have just lost their dad. Like the piece of you that just showed up saying like keep fighting. Can you just leave us with a message from your heart to theirs?
Okay. So shift in everybody from the 20s to 30s to 40s to where I'm at now. I'm in my 50s. That's hard to say. Okay. So what I will say about that is this: you do need to fight for it because at the end of the day, when you get to where I'm at and your kids are getting into their teenage years, and of course I have an adult child, for me right now, everything is done for my family. There was a time where my kids were always important. They were always right up there, but I was important too. My fun, my deal, what I'm going to do, selfish, that type of thing. At the end of the day, when you start dropping some of that stuff and you start understanding a little bit more about what you need to do in the legacy that you have to leave, then it makes it easier to start seeing what's really important. And if you have things in your life that aren't working, that are crutches, that are problems, you have to start dropping them if you're going to have your kids thrive. So our kids are not going to get to ultimately where they want to be unless we are watching ourselves and seeing what message we're delivering. Are we, you know, showing anger towards our wives? Are we drinking out of control? Are we out with the guys every single night? Are we in a depressive state? Whatever that may be, you have to work through it, because if not, your family's not going to stay together. And if your family doesn't stay together, then of course it evolves into the next generation. And then what does that look like for them? So where I'm sitting right now at this point, with some of the things I've been through and some of the people in my life that I've lost and some of my friends that aren't here with us anymore, I will tell you that at this point it is all about what's going to be here for my children when I'm gone. What's their families going to look like? Um, that's where I am right now, and that's a good place to be. It's not a selfish place. It's a giving place, but it's a rewarding place because you see that what you're setting up for your children is working, and that's what it's all about.